Let's take a look at project templates. Project templates give you a quick way to get reasonably accurate information out of your model quickly. Sure, every project is different, but if you start out from a good baseline, then you can refine it. This is also a good place to add information to projects when the program you're using to produce them doesn't offer these settings. So let's see what we can set up. After you log in and select a project, click on the Project Defaults tab. This tells you which template is currently in use. The tabs below display the information you can save in a template. Until the Load Selected Template button is pressed, the Save Changes, Save as New Template, and Assign Template to Project buttons will be grayed out. Select a template to edit and press the Load Selected Template button. Now you can make changes and save them to a template and apply them to a project. The Info tab will tell you if the current project is assigned to this template, a company name, username, and the current template name you're editing. This is where you can update a name or delete a template should you need to. The Building tab is mostly used to determine solar PV cell or hot water cell viability. This setting ignores if there are windows or doors and considers if 100% of the surface area were covered with solar cells. Would it have enough area for a reasonable payback period? Unless you know you'll be going for solar on the majority of your projects, I would leave this unchecked for a template. The Spaces tab has some useful template settings. Depending on your region, you can select a default for conditioning type. If your company specializes in retail or residential, you may want to define a typical space type. I would look up your company standards for local building codes to determine the minimum values to assign for lighting power density, equipment power density, and area per person. You can also use the Green Building Studio defaults. Sensible and latent heat gains per person should come from your ASHRAE tables for activity levels of occupants. The design temperature is a target to be maintained for the space regardless of heating or cooling mode. Notice you don't have to define each of these in a template if you want to ensure it doesn't get overlooked, but minimum values are recommended. Many of the settings may be transferred from the software you use to generate your GBXML file. On the Zones tab, default set points for heating and cooling can be established. These are for those moderate days where the heating and cooling systems could be arguing over which mode they should be in. If you are cooling a space down to 70 degrees, upon reaching 70 degrees, should the heat turn on? Of course not. There should be at least 2 degrees of separation between the heating and cooling set points. The outside air per person will have a huge impact on your HVAC load calculations, and will be very different from one space to the next. I would set a minimum value based on your local building code, but pay close attention to each space for this value. I like the Surfaces tab for defaults. Here you can define the minimum settings for all the construction materials based on the ASHRAE values for your region. Using this, you can quickly determine the energy needs of your baseline building before you make any improvements. Any additional tweaking to your building constructions must be equal to this value or better. The Openings tab lets you define the default properties for all the glass that may be on each surface of the building. This is another critical value for energy modeling, as the sun has a huge impact on the demands of building performance. Everything from the amount of light needed to heating needs in the winter to cooling needs in the summer are affected by the sun. Lastly, we can define a default HVAC system and domestic hot water system. Once you have all the default settings established, you can use them to overwrite settings of an existing project or define the settings for a project without these settings. Don't forget to save your settings or to save as a new template. Once saved, you can assign the template to any project you need. You can't export these settings to transfer to someone else though. They are unique to your account.